That's what I'm saying. I really think he's trying to drive us to quit so he can get promoted. The dude is unhinged. You're new, so he probably won't mess with you. Unless it turns out you're good at your job or something.
I was in the middle of talking to the new guy, Bryce, in the break room when I spotted Dr. Bennett rushing down the hall.
Hold on,
I said, stepping into the hallway.
Bennett, you gonna come to the card game tonight?
Bennett wore a scowl so deep, I thought it might be condensing his brain. He carried a banker's box under one arm, and he raised his other hand palm out and shook his head once, hustling past. I watched him disappear into his lab.
What was that about?
Bryce asked, having seen the interaction.
Is he always like that? No. I've known that guy for 3 years. I've never seen him like that. Something must be wrong. I wonder if I should go talk to him, see what's up. He didn't seem to want to talk. Maybe leave him alone for a minute.
I looked at my watch, seeing that my break still had 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll try after my break.
Bryce and I moved back into the break room. I poured a cup of coffee, still thinking about Bennett. He was one of the most easygoing, always ready with a smile guys I'd ever met. Super smart, too.
Maybe Jerkins is fucking with him, too,
Bryce suggested.
Oh, I'm sure he is. But that's nothing new. Jerkins has made it his mission to drive everyone with any seniority up a damn wall. Bennett usually lets it slide off him like water off a duck's back. I doubt that's it. Please tell me Jerkins isn't coming to the card game tonight.
I gave Bryce a don't be stupid look and said,
Of course he is. He always weasels his way in. Somehow he hears about these things, like he's got listening devices planted all over the place.
Bryce laughed and made a show of looking under the break room table for a bug. The floor shook like an earthquake as a reverberant bang traveled across the site.
Shit!
Bryce said, throwing himself under the table. I crouched like a surfer, holding my coffee cup out as I tried to stop it from spilling. It was no use. The hot liquid spilled all over my hand, prompting me to drop the mug, which shattered on the tile floor. After a few mild tremors, it was over. The building wasn't going to collapse on us, which was a good thing in my book. The breach alarm started sounding, but at Site 17, a low-risk overflow site, we didn't house anything particularly dangerous. I couldn't even remember the last time we did a containment breach drill.
That sounded like it came from nearby,
I said, helping Bryce to his feet. The implications dawned on me.
Bennett!
I rushed out of the room, slipping in my spilled coffee and nearly going down. But Bryce grabbed me and kept me from busting my ass. We ran down the hall to Bennett's lab. People were poking their heads out of offices and labs.
What the hell is going on? What was that? Is it a containment breach?
I ignored the shouted questions, slowing as I reached the lab. Before I could grab the door, it crashed open, narrowly missing my hand, no doubt saving me from several broken fingers. The close call was immediately eclipsed by the sight before me. Bennett stumbled out, a nasty gash on the left side of his neck. Some viscous liquid spewed from the wound, a liquid that was definitely not blood. Its shiny black color and the fact that it seemed to be bubbling like boiling tar prompted me to back away as Bennett came toward Bryce and I. Instinctively, I grabbed Bryce and pulled him back, all the while staring at the horrified look on Bennett's face. He reached a hand out and said something I couldn't understand. Then his body started expanding like a balloon. His clothes, unable to contain the fast-growing mass, ripped and fell or hung in tatters. With his shirt ripped open, I could see that his flesh tore open down the middle of his abdomen. I expected blood and bones and organs, but instead what I saw was an expanding mess of teeth, eyeballs, and pitted flesh. As whatever semblance of Bennett disappeared, enveloped by this new organic mass, Bryce and I backed up. The thing quickly doubled in size. Irregular, fleshy tentacles appeared, whipping out and slapping the floor to drag the creature toward us. While many of the teeth appeared randomly, protruding from the flesh without anything resembling a mouth nearby, other teeth appeared surrounding mouths. Several of these orifices gaped, releasing a discordant symphony of shrieks that caused stabs of pain in my ears. It was a surprise that I heard the shout from behind me at all, but I did, and I spun around to see 3 security officers running up. Bryce and I flattened ourselves against the wall to get out of the line of fire. The officers fired on the creature, bullets punching into its still expanding mass, causing the shrieks to grow more frantic. They paused in their onslaught and waved us back. I happily rushed down the hall, getting behind them, Bryce following on my heels. As soon as we had the security officers between us and the creature, they resumed firing. A tentacle whipped out and smacked a rifle out of one of the officer's hand. Another tendril, almost simultaneously, hit another officer with an uppercut that lifted him off his feet and sent him crashing to the floor on his back. The third officer got a tentacle to the crotch, causing him to scream as he dropped his rifle in favor of his injured anatomy. Seeing that the thing was getting closer to the downed and unarmed security officers, I rushed forward and grabbed the nearest rifle. Thinking quickly, I aimed at one of the creature's many eyes and fired. It was a lucky shot, but I hit the eyeball, which prompted the creature to shriek as it recoiled. A too fast tentacle shot out toward me, but the nearest security officer yanked me down, saving me from a broken jaw at the very least.
The eyes!
I said to the recovering officers.
Aim for the eyes!
They picked their weapons up and did just that. They dodged the worst of the tentacle hits as they backed the creature down the hall toward a containment cell. Several more officers showed up, and together they slowly backed the creature into the cell and then locked it inside. Bryce and I, who had watched the whole thing, looked at each other as blood trickled from our ears and we tried to slow our hearts down.
What the fuck was that?
Bryce asked.
Take a seat, please,
Director Carter said.
Both of you.
It had been 11 days since the incident, and the fact that I was in the director's office with Juergens didn't bode well for me. In the intervening days since containing the creature that had once been Bennett, or perhaps still was, the creature had changed slowly into a human form. A familiar human form. It looked just like Dr. Bennett. Once Juergens and I were sitting, Director Carter stood up from his seat. Using his spindly hands, he pushed his plush chair into the desk's knee hole and started kneading the top of the leather chair as if it were someone's shoulders. This was a habit that I recognized, and it meant Carter was uncomfortable. I glanced over at Juergens, who stared up at the director with a dopey, open-mouthed expression that clearly said,
I'm in awe of you, Director.
I could almost see the brown gathering on his nose. Juergens wasn't anything remarkable. He had a flat face and a wide nose, straight and 2 white teeth, and a tan that most likely came out of a bottle. His brown hair had frosted tips and made his head look like it was stuck in the 90s. He noticed me staring at him and, without actually looking at me, he flipped me the bird while keeping his hand down by his thigh so Carter wouldn't see it. Then he turned and winked at me, as if it was all a joke. But it wasn't. He was always doing that to people, telling them to fuck off or flipping them the bird whenever they asked him to do something. Then he would laugh and say, "Kidding!" Only he would laugh and say it in a way where you knew he wasn't kidding.
I've made a decision about SCP-6729,
Director Carter said, still massaging the chair.
It wasn't an easy one, but I'm confident you'll both see it's the right one. Here it comes,
I thought.
Dr. Lomax, I'm afraid Dr. Juergens will be taking the lead on this one. I think that's the best course of action,
Juergens put it solemnly, unable to keep from smiling. I flexed my jaw and shook my head.
But I knew Bennett better than anyone else. I'll be able to tell if it's him or not. That's exactly why I've decided to give Juergens the reins,
Carter said.
You were too close with Bennett. It could affect your judgment, but I'm not saying you're off it entirely. You two will be working together on this. Juergens will just be doing the interviews. Sir, I don't think that's a good idea,
Juergens said.
I work better alone. I know you'll both do an excellent job,
Carter said.
I have the utmost faith in you both. Find out whatever you can about what Bennett was doing. Find out if he's still in there somewhere. We need to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
Juergens and I looked at each other. The smug expression was gone from his face. he hated sharing the stage with anyone else. I'm not too proud to admit that I felt a little satisfaction, but I also knew he would do whatever he could to drive me off the project.
Any questions?
Carter asked, pulling his chair out again and preparing to sit.
No,
I said, standing.
thank you.
Jurgens stood as well.
Thank you, Director Carter. We won't let you down.
I rolled my eyes as I walked out of the office. I sat in the observation room, watching on a computer screen as Jurgens stepped into the containment cell. Bennett, or the creature that had taken his form, stood in one corner of the furniture-less room, facing the wall. We'd tested the waters with a couple of D-class personnel to see if the creature had violent intent, and so far, it had been extremely passive. It had even tried communicating in English, asking for food and water in stilted sentences. We'd given it both food and water, observing its consumption closely. It wore a gray jumpsuit we'd bribed it to put on, having been previously naked. We made a trade, giving it dessert in the form of a brownie in exchange for putting the jumpsuit on. For all exterior purposes, it looked and acted like a human, albeit a stiff and strange one. Now, as Jurgens stepped into the room, he was flanked by two security officers with rifles held at the ready.
Hello there,
Jurgens said, easing his way to the middle of the room, keeping his weight on the balls of his feet in case he had to flee.
We have designated you SCP-6729, but I would rather call you by your name.
Slowly, the Bennett-shaped creature turned around and looked at Jurgens.
What is your name?
The creature opened its mouth, but as it did so, its head expanded and several other mouths sprouted. It used these mouths to emit a gurgling, growling noise that caused a pressure to build in the middle of my head. On the screen, Jurgens clutched his head while the two guards raised their rifles.
Shoot it!
Jurgens screamed. I slapped the intercom.
Do not fire! I repeat, do not fire!
By the time I had finished countermanding Jurgens' order, the creature had stopped making the noise. Its head deflated, morphing back to normal. Jurgens turned on his heel and stormed out of the containment cell, appearing in the observation room a few moments later. He stepped up to me and put a finger in my face.
You don't get to give orders when I'm in there. You are... Actually, I do, because I have seniority. Besides, you asked for the thing's name, you idiot. Do you think it was going to say Todd or something? Use your head.
Jurgens' cheeks flushed in anger. He poked my sternum with a finger as a cruel grin spread across his face. He jabbed me again and again, and he shook his head and laughed.
When I get promoted, I'm going to... Go ahead. Finish your sentence. You're going to what?
Jurgens seemed to remember that there were cameras watching us in here. He glanced around and laughed without humor. Then he turned around and headed back into the containment cell.
You wanted to know my name,
the creature said as soon as Jurgens came back in.
but I guess you can call me Grim instead. I like that name, Grim.
After taking a moment to get himself back under control, straightening his lab coat and stretching his neck, Jurgens said,
Is Dr. Bennett still in there with you?
Grim nodded.
Yes, some of him. It's like I'm getting drip-fed his memories. And why did you take him over?
Grim raised his hands.
I didn't want to, I swear. I was just out minding my own business when a crazy whirlpool thing opened up and sucked me in. Next thing I know, I'm trying to fit into this new dimension. I have a physical body for the first time ever, and it hurts because people are shooting at me. So don't blame me for it. Blame Bennett. He was the one messing with stuff he didn't understand. What exactly was he doing when he summoned you? Do you remember?
Grim considered this for a moment. Then he shook his head.
I guess those memories aren't here yet. I'm drawing a blank. You guys don't know what he was doing?
Jurgens shook his head.
Unfortunately, the footage and notes were damaged upon your arrival here, and it seems Bennett was off script, so to speak. He wasn't supposed to be working on anything interdimensional. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I would love a way back to my plane of existence. So I'll tell you whatever I can as the memories come. Thank you. I think that's enough for today. Hey, wait. Can I get a bed in here, please? This body needs sleep, and the floor isn't very comfortable.
Jurgens looked him over, a smile twitching his lips.
I'll see what I can do, but I don't think the director will allow it at this juncture. I'll fight for it, though.
Without another word, Jurgens headed out the door, followed by the 2 guards. I intercepted him in the observation room.
What was that about not giving him a bed? You know Carter won't care. It's standard in humanoid containment cells, and he hasn't shown any aggressive tendencies. It, Lomax, not he, it. You best remember that, and I'll be the judge of what he gets. We can use a bed as a bargaining chip to get him to tell us what we want. He's cooperating. Just give him the damn bed or I will.
Jurgens stepped closer.
If you do, I'll have it taken out again, and I'll let it know that it's your fault.
Jurgens left the room, and I shared a look with the 2 security officers. I knew them both. Lars shook his head, and Bullock said,
That guy's a real asshole. Yeah,
I said.
he really is.
I waited until the security officers left before returning to my seat at the desk. I stared at Grim for a long time, thinking, my fingers steepled in front of me. After several minutes, I logged into the security network and shut off the audio-visual equipment in Grim's cell. I waited, leaning back in the chair, thinking. My heart rate had increased, but I still hadn't gone too far. If my cutting off the security cameras had caused a red flag anywhere in the system, I could just say it was an accident if someone barged into the room demanding answers. Minutes passed and no one came. It was just as I had suspected. Director Carter was running anything but a tight ship here. He was probably going to get fired for the little mishap that brought us Grim. The fact that we hadn't done a containment breach drill in months wouldn't bode well for him. Finally, I got up and walked into the containment cell, my heart going wild in my chest. Was I really doing this? Grim, who still stood where he'd been when Jurgens left, looked up at me. I forced a smile into my face.
Hello, Bennett. Make it quick,
Director Carter said as Jurgens and I stepped into the room.
Those damn investigators from the council are breathing down my neck today. I'm not sure if I'll...
Carter stopped himself, as if remembering we were his underlings. He looked up from his computer for the first time since we'd entered, and then cleared his throat.
What do you have for me?
I noticed he hadn't invited us to sit, which I didn't mind. I was afraid that if I sat, I wouldn't be able to help myself from fidgeting. Jurgens glared at me as though silently threatening to let him do the talking. I gestured for him to go ahead.
SCP-6729 says it has vital information on what Dr. Bennett was working on at the time of the incident. But it refuses to tell me about it. It says it wants all 3 of us there with it before it'll say a word. Why do you suppose that is?
Jurgens shifted his stance.
I think it's going to ask for something big. Like what? Well, over the last 6 months, I've approved most of the standard furnishings for its cell, but I haven't been able to get much information out of the thing. I think it's stringing me along. But it did mention something in our last meeting. Something about a Project Stargaze?
Director Carter's eyes widened as his mouth came open. He shot up from his seat and came around his desk.
Okay, let's go. If we get this done now, I might still be able to save my head from the chopping block. Sounds like Dr. Bennett was working on something I didn't approve.
Jurgens shot a surprised, but not altogether happy look my way as we followed Carter out of his office. In the elevator, Carter asked,
Do you know what it might want in exchange for this information? It's obsessed with baking shows. It wants a functioning kitchen so it can bake things it sees on TV. But I'm not so sure giving it what it wants is getting us anywhere. I mean, it's been 6 months, and everything it has told us is stuff we already know about Bennett's projects. I think the carrot is no longer working. We should switch to the stick.
Carter shook his head as the elevator door opened. We all got off and headed toward the containment cell.
SCP-6729 has been a model prisoner thus far. We don't know what all it's capable of if we make it mad. Better stick with the carrot. At least until the damned investigation is over. Then we can see about the stick. Yes, sir.
As we moved through the observation room, my stomach started doing somersaults. Part of me wanted to call it all off, but I pushed that part away, knowing what it would mean at this juncture. I tried to ignore the sweat building in my armpits and at my low back as we moved into the containment cell. A single guard, Lars, joined us inside, just in case. Grim sat on his twin bed, back straight, wearing a clean gray jumpsuit. He smiled with Bennett's face as we came in. After 6 months of negotiations between Jurgens and Grim, the place looked more like a college dorm room than the empty space it had been at the beginning. There was a bed, a TV with streaming capabilities, a bookshelf with a dozen books on it, a reading chair with a lamp, and a rug on the floor. Of course, there had also been a small bathroom partition installed in the back corner, complete with a shower and toilet. The three of us stopped in the middle of the room, with Lars hanging out to one side so we could cover Grim with his rifle.
Well, we're all here,
Director Carter said.
I hear you have something to tell us about Project Stargaze. That's right,
Grim said, standing from his bed, still smiling. He looked at me, and I felt as if I was going to vomit. I averted my eyes. What happened next happened fast. Grim raised both his hands, one toward us and one toward Lars. His hands shot out from his sleeves, propelled by bloating, stretching flesh. His fingers elongated as they crossed the distance in a heartbeat. By the time they reached their targets, they no longer resembled fingers. They were thicker, covered with teeth. Eyes had sprouted from what had once been the backs of his palms. I let myself drop to the floor, and one of the tendrils whipped through the air over my head. The other tendrils reached Jurgens and Carter. Jurgens reacted faster, reaching up and grabbing the bumpy tentacles with his hands as they stretched for his face. Toothy mouths appeared where his fingers were and chopped down, severing his digits with a crunch and a spray of blood. Carter managed to get one arm to protect his head, but two tentacles wrapped around it and yanked the limb off. Blood sprayed over me as I scrambled on hands and knees toward Lars and the exit behind him. The security officer's rifle had been knocked away, and he was in the process of being slammed against the wall when I neared him. He fell to the floor like a loose collection of limbs, unconscious. As I went for the rifle, Grim was busy killing Jurgens and Carter. Once Jurgens' fingers were out of the way, a single undulating tentacle shoved its way down his throat and eventually came out his anus in a spray of blood and stool. The tentacle lifted Jurgens up. He was still alive at this point, and smashed him against the floor repeatedly until he was nothing but a mess of protruding bones and torn flesh. Carter had things a little easier, but not by much. While he was screaming and staring at the bloody nub where his arm had been, a tentacle with evenly spaced mouths wrapped around his throat, and the mouths went to work chomping through his neck from all sides. By the time these mouths had severed his head, I had the rifle in my hand and was aiming it at Grim. But I didn't fire, because it seemed to be focusing solely on the other two. I grabbed Lars by his vest and dragged him back out of the room. The door slid shut behind us. I left Lars just outside the door and ran to hit the manual emergency button on the wall. For some reason, the automated alarm hadn't sounded. Standing by the observation deck, breathing heavily, I stared down at the screen. The room was a bloody mess, but Grim was once again in his human form, and once again sitting on his bed. But he was staring directly into the camera, and he gave me a wink just before the security team rushed into the room.
Listen, I know these circumstances aren't ideal,
I said to the Site-17 staff gathered in the amphitheater. My staff now.
I never wanted the job, not this way. But I'm going to make the best of it, and I hope you're willing to help me with that. However, this does mean we're going to make some changes. We will resume regular containment breach drills, along with all other emergency drills. And I guarantee you this, my door will always be open. Whether you're a security officer, or a junior researcher, or a janitor, you can come to me with any issues you may have. I'll do my very best to make Site-17 the safest, most productive, and most satisfying Foundation site to work at.
With my little speech done, I left the stage to a smattering of applause. feeling good for the first time since my 2 colleagues were killed in front of me. As I headed back to my office, Bryce caught up with me.
Hey, Director,
He said with a smile.
that was a good speech. I'm hoping you meant it all.
I faltered momentarily, looking at him with a raised eyebrow.
Of course I did. No, yeah, of course. I didn't mean it like that. It's just... Yes?
I asked, continuing to walk.
Well, don't get me wrong. I appreciate you promoting me and putting me in charge of SCP-6729, but I can't help but notice that you already put in a requisition for a full kitchen?
I nodded.
Yes, so? So the thing just killed 2 people. Don't you think that rewarding it for murder isn't the best idea?
I stopped walking and turned to face Bryce.
We don't know what it is capable of. Killing Juergens and Carter was just a taste of its capabilities. So until I get approval to move it to a site better equipped to handle interdimensional possessions, I think our best course of action is to keep it happy. After all, we've seen a little bit of what it can do when it's not happy. Yeah, I get your logic, but I'm just not clear on one thing. Why did it suddenly want to kill those 2? I mean, Juergens I could understand, but Carter? It hadn't even had any contact with Carter before that meeting. It doesn't make sense, unless...
I felt my face flush and my throat go dry. I swallowed loudly, generating a click that sounded like a gunshot to my suddenly oversensitive ears.
Unless what?
Bryce looked both ways down the hall, making sure no one was nearby.
Unless you and it have a little agreement.
I flinched away from him as if struck.
Are you saying what I think you're? Cut the act, Director. I came into the observation room when you were talking to 6729 one day. Must have been 7 months ago now. I thought it was weird that the security footage was off, that it wasn't recording video or audio while you 2 were deep in conversation. But I couldn't hear what you were saying and I didn't think much of it. I was still a noob back then, but now...
I stood there, shaking, looking at the young man I'd taken under my wing. He smiled.
Relax, Director. If you take care of me, your secret doesn't have to come out. We'll come to an agreement. I'm sure of it. Talk to you soon.
Bryce patted my shoulder and headed down the hall, leaving me shaking and sweating. After a few long moments, I resumed my walk. By the time I reached my office, the director's office, I knew what I had to do. I would stay late tonight and have another little chat with Grimm. We had come to an agreement once before. We could do it again. I wouldn't have one of my own employees blackmail me. That wasn't going to happen. Breathing a heavy sigh, I sat in the plush leather chair and put my feet up on the desk. It felt good to be king. SCP-6729 is an extra-dimensional entity that currently inhabits the corpse of former Foundation researcher Dr. Bennett. The precise method of Dr. Bennett's possession is currently unknown, but it is clear that it occurred during an experiment conducted by the researcher, the details of which were not shared with other personnel. The entity's host body shows no physical signs of decay, despite having been in containment for 8 months and retaining no vitals or observable organ functions. While it has no need for nutrition, it regularly consumes food and drink, both to mimic human behavior and for its enjoyment. While SCP-6729 retains Dr. Bennett's appearance, it is able to distort its host body and often does so, even when unobserved. It has been recorded splitting its skin open, growing additional limbs identical to Dr. Bennett's, as well as manifesting various organs and appendages non-human in origin. To hear more stories like this, be sure to hit subscribe and turn notifications on. I'll see you in the next one.